woke with the cold weight of silence filling the ancient stone corridors, the thick mist barely allowing the pale blue of the winter dawn to seep inside. Your bare feet met the uneven, cold floor beneath, each step cautious and muffled, as if afraid to disturb the ghostly quiet that wrapped the castle like a shroud. The sharp scent of damp wood and mold lingered heavily in the air, coating your lungs with a chill unlike any you had known. The rough fabric of your worn clothing clung uncomfortably to your skin with every slow movement, a constant reminder of the fragile barrier between you and the creeping cold. Outside, the village lay hidden beneath a blanket of fog that twisted like silent whispers in the empty streets, touched only by the faint crackle of frost beneath your tentative steps. The air smelled faintly of old smoke, lingering remnants of nights that once burned bright with ceremony, but now held only shadows. Your hand trembled almost imperceptibly as it brushed the faded curtain aside. The threadbare wool of your single coat scratched gently against your wrist as you moved it with deliberate slowness, careful not to make a sound. The distant wind sighed softly through the castle's broken windows, carrying with it the coppery tang of rust and the sweet hint of incense burning somewhere forgotten, a solitary offering to the restless spirits bound to this place. If losing your phone's signal today stirs frustration, then imagine the dread in a world where the last ember of fire could vanish into ash without hope of rekindle. Such thoughts slipped through your mind as you began the endless rituals that marked your days here, movements repeating with measured monotony, scraping the dull surfaces of ancient wood and stone. You wiped and wiped again, your motions deliberate and slow under the weight of invisible eyes that watched from shadows just beyond sight. The whisper of the wind outside mixed with a sudden hush. The village's dogs ceased their distant barking, as though sensing what you dared not acknowledge aloud. A heated moment flickered briefly in your chest, a faint rising warmth from the community fire, seen in a fleeting glimpse through a crack in a far window. Faces blurred by fog shared silent strength, a fragile hope that held steady even when the night's shadow crept ever closer. Yet within that fragile glow, the atmosphere thickened. A subtle tension seized the air, tightening around you like a slow coil. You noticed how the neighbors exchanged brief, loaded glances before turning their eyes away, as if afraid to meet what might be lurking just beyond the edge of vision. Whatever had stopped the dog's barks was not at rest. You could feel it lingering in the silence, a presence folded into the stone and shadow, waiting and watching. The weight in your throat grew heavier, the icy breath of the unseen whispering promises of the vengeful Onryō, a haunting not of wrathful screams, but of endless, suffocating dread. Hey, before Morpheus takes you for good, quickly check if you're still subscribed. For some, the button vanished, and I don't want you missing the next stories to fall asleep to. Take a moment and leave a like, soft as a pillow. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? Your interaction keeps this quiet corner alive. Thanks for being part of it. You pressed your palm against the rough stone wall, feeling its damp chill seep slowly into your skin. Mist hovered thick just beyond the narrow corridor, weaving around the broken shards of light like a stubborn shadow reluctant to let go. Your breath came steady but shallow, the cold air biting at your throat with every cautious step you took forward. The castle's silence settled over you again, heavy and watchful, interrupted only by the faint scrape of your fingers brushing dust from a crumbling ledge. Each footfall echoed softly, uneven stones pressing coolness through your thin soles. Slowly, deliberately, the passage ahead bent sharply, swallowing the dim winter light until only the whisper of draft met your ear. You paused, listening beneath the weight of stillness, the faintest hint of movement stirring beyond. A distant creak, the slow sigh of settling timber, or perhaps the cautious shift of something unseen. Your heart picked up its rhythm, just barely, like a subdued drumbeat, tapping beneath the quiet. Along the corridor, a faded tapestry hung askew, the frayed threads trembling gently as the thin wind slipped by. Its muted colors, deep burgundy, fading into shadows of gray, seemed almost alive under your gaze, hinting at stories lost to time. You reached out, fingertips trailing across the surface, feeling the gritty texture where years of dust and neglect had conspired. The fabric clung faintly to your skin, carrying with it a faint scent of old dye mingled with the mustiness of decay. Holding your breath, you let your fingers linger, following the worn threads as if they might guide you somewhere beyond the stone walls. A soft scrape echoed again, this time closer, and the hairs at the back of your neck prickled. You turned slowly, carefully, eyes narrowing into the dimness. The corridor seemed unchanged, shadows pooling around distant arches, but nothing moved visibly. You swallowed the dry, knot in your throat, every muscle tensed beneath your worn clothes. The cold seeped deeper now, not just from stone and air, but from something watching, waiting beyond sight. A presence folded into the silence like a secret folding tighter itself. Your hand tightened around the slender wooden pole you carried, the weathered surface rough beneath your fingers, steady and familiar. The scent of resin lingered faintly, grounding you, a small comfort amid the creeping dread. Ahead, a faint orange glow bled softly through the cracks of a heavy door, fragile warmth spilling like a promise. You stepped forward, each movement deliberate, slow, matching the steady pulse of your breath. The cold was relentless, but the light ahead whispered of refuge, a gathering point where the village's quiet flame still glowed. The door gave way with a muted creak, metal hinges singing their tired song that barely disturbed the thick air. Inside, the room unfolded around you like a hesitant sigh, half lit by dwindling embers, half swallowed by creeping shadow. The smoky scent of smoldering wood filled your senses, underscored by the faint sweetness of melting wax. You moved carefully, your fingers tracing the stone hearth's edge, rough and warm in contrast to the chill beyond. Around a low fire, figures sat in shadowed silence. Their faces were veiled in the mist that drifted lazily across the floor. Features indistinct, but their presence solid. You recognized the steady rise and fall of their chests, the quiet exchange of glances, threaded with an unspoken resolve. The warmth of the fire seemed to pulse gently, tethering all of you to this sliver of light amid the encroaching frost. You took the seat offered, a simple wooden bench scarred by years of use, uneven and unforgiving. As you settled, the hard angle pressed into your spine, anchoring you in place, reminding you of the night's chill and the weight of your vigil. The air was thick with quiet murmurs, breaths, soft rustling of fabric, the faint crackle of flame, but no words disturbed the solemn hush. Your eyes adjusted fully to the dimness, and in the shadows you saw the sharp glint of a blade resting nearby, a silent sentinel reflecting flickers of firelight. The hours stretched slowly, marked by the steady ebb and flow of breath and heat. Outside, the wind moaned low and distant, stirring the veil of fog that clung to the village walls like a restless ghost. Somewhere far off, the faint tolling of a bell teased the stillness, not a summons, but a mournful echo, fading before it could reach you fully. Your thoughts circled the faded letters you'd glimpsed the day before, cryptic symbols carved into stone, their meaning just beyond reach. They seemed to pulse now in your mind, a riddle wrapped in shadow, binding you tighter to this place with every passing breath. Eventually, the fire's glow dimmed further, embers retreating into ash. You rose cautiously, muscles stiff beneath the thin layers of cloth that barely shielded you from the cold that swallowed the corners of the room. Frost had begun to creep along the windowsill, delicate crystals spreading slowly like frozen lace. You approached the threshold, drawn by a restless pull as the air shifted, not with wind, but with something deeper, older. A faint vibration hummed through the stones underfoot, subtle but undeniable. Outside, the fog thickened, swirling into dense curtains that blurred shapes into phantoms. The village had fallen almost entirely silent once more. No distant dogs barked, no clatter of footsteps echoed beyond your own. Only the faint, metallic scent of cold air tightening in your lungs. Your hand trembled slightly as it brushed a loose stone in the wall, the surface strangely warm beneath your touch, a whisper against the grave chill. Then, just at the edge of hearing, a sound emerged, a soft, deliberate tapping, slow and rhythmic, echoing faintly from within the deepest shadows of the castle's heart. It was not a scream, not a cry, but a pulse of warning that rippled through the cold air, wrapping around you like the slow tightening of an unseen noose. You dared not turn directly toward it. Instead, you stepped back into the dim safety of the hall, breath steadying while your mind raced silently with the knowledge that whatever waited beyond was no longer hiding. And from the silence, a new awareness bloomed, a chilling certainty that the next moment would carry you deeper beyond the fragile glow of firelight into a darkness you could not yet fathom. You stepped back into the corridor, the door's faint creak closing behind you in a whisper, swallowed quickly by the thick mist that clung stubbornly around the castle's core. The cold had settled deeper into your bones now, a slow, creeping chill that felt less like temperature and more like the weight of the castle pressing in on you. Your breath formed fragile clouds that seemed far too warm for this place, fading gently with a silence that wrapped tightly around your shoulders. The stone beneath your fingers was damp where you rested your hand again, rough and uneven as if the castle itself breathed through the cracks. You paused, sensing the air shift, the faintest stir of something unseen, a presence folded neatly into the cold shadows ahead. The tapping you had heard before echoed faintly once more, deliberate and slow, like a heartbeat muted beneath layers of frost. Your muscles tensed, but not in panic, rather in a slow turn of alertness, measuring each moment with the care of tracing a fragile thread. As you moved forward, your footsteps traced the jagged outline of the corridor's cracked stones. The uneven floor pressed into your feet, sending shivers that traveled upward, filling you from the tips of your toes to the base of your skull. The mist swirled low, wrapping around your ankles like a restless sea, each wisp seeming to pull at your resolve with silent insistence. The air tasted faintly of iron and earth, heavy and cold, twisting around the corners where the orange glow from the fire had not reached. Ahead, the corridor branched, splitting into steps that descended further into darkness, and a narrow doorway too shrouded in mist to reveal what lay beyond. You hesitated at this fork, the familiar scent of burning resin mingled now with a subtle trace of something else. An old, sharp tang that pricked your nostrils like the edge of a forgotten blade. The soft tapping grew stronger here, but no figure appeared. Instead, shadows pooled deeper beneath the low arch, twisting slowly like smoke caught in a breeze you could not feel. You caught your breath, slow and even, counting silently with the measured patience the cold demanded. The worn fabric of your coat rasped softly against your skin as you shifted your weight. The keen scent of damp stone wove itself around you, tangible and persistent, each inhalation drawing the weight of the castle's ancient hold deeper into your lungs. Your fingertips brushed again against the wall, tracing a line of delicate cracks, the stone's coldness steadying your restless mind. The faint sound flickered again, closer now, followed by a near imperceptible rustle. Your heart beat with the rhythm of the tapping, deliberate and unyielding. Yet there was no source to be found, only the distorted echo bouncing through empty halls that stretched far beyond your sight. The tapestry you had touched before hung silently, its fabric now a faint tremble in the draught, shadowed patterns barely discernible, like forgotten memories etched into thread. The cold seeped sharper, hollowing deeper into your ribs as you made the choice to descend. Each footstep down the narrow stairs was a slow negotiation with the darkness, the sound swallowed immediately by the vast silence beneath. The stone walls leaned closer, their smoothness worn by time and whispered secrets long kept. You felt the weight of those secrets pressing in, like a breath held too long, waiting to be freed, but bound tightly in folds of shadow. At the bottom, the air was heavier, thick with the scent of must and a faint, almost sweet smoke that curled lazily from somewhere unseen. Flickering shadows danced on the rough-hewn walls, cast by a single candle set in a twisted iron holder. The flame wavered with a gentle breath of air, fragile but resolute in the thick cold. You stepped toward it slowly, watching how the warmth wove tender patterns across your fingers when you stretched your hand near, but not too close. Beyond the flickering glow, a narrow passage stretched onward, lined with uneven stones, slick with moisture. Your footsteps echoed here, softer now, as if the air itself absorbed the sound in reverence. The tapping beat persisted, not loud, but steady, a slow, deliberate pulse that seemed to carry a message beneath its measured cadence. It tugged at something deep within you, a thread of curiosity tangled with instinctive caution. The scent deepened here, mingling earth and smoke with an undercurrent of something metallic and sharp, like old blood trapped beneath the stones. Your hand found the worn wooden pole, the rough texture grounding you as you drew a slow breath, tasting the cold air that stung your throat with every exhale. The castle's secrets were close now, woven tight in the shadows and the silence. A sudden chill swept through the passage, brushing past like a whispered warning. The flame flickered wildly, shadows leaping and twisting before settling back to a steady glow. Your eyes caught a movement at the very edge of the candlelight, a flicker of something dim, a shape that melted away before your gaze could focus, slithing into the stone's embrace. You swallowed the sudden tightness in your chest and took a step forward, the cold pressing harder against your skin. The silence, heavier still. Then beneath the slow tapping, another sound surfaced, barely a whisper, a breath held just beyond hearing. The pulse quickened ever so slightly, sending tremors up your arm. You sensed, rather than saw, the space around you shift as if the castle exhaled softly through the cracks and shadows. You turn slowly, aligning yourself with the passage's dark embrace, feeling the weight of unseen eyes watching from just beyond the flame's reach. The mist curled at your feet once more, a swirling dance of silence and cold that promised no relief. Your pulse beat faintly against the stillness, tethered to the rhythm of the tapping that now felt almost like a summons. And then, from the depths of that darkened passage, came a breath, a sound so low and subtle it might have been your own heart, or the castle exhaling a secret held tight through centuries. You stood, rooted for a moment longer, a slow certainty settling over you, chilling and absolute. Then, the tapping ceased. You lingered at the threshold for a moment longer, the faint echo of the tapping dissolving into the thick mist behind you. The corridor stretched ahead, its cold stone walls swallowing what little light your eyes could hold. Each breath you drew sounded unnaturally loud in the stillness, a fragile rhythm, barely alive in the cavernous quiet. Your fingers still clung lightly to the wooden pole, the worn resin scent grounding you as the cold sank deeper into your skin. With slow, deliberate steps, you moved forward, feeling the rough edges of the stones press unevenly beneath your soles. The creeping fog whispered around your ankles, chilling in the way the night does when it gathers close to the earth, unwilling to release its grasp. Somewhere far beyond your sight, the faint groan of settling timber whispered secrets that may have belonged to a different time, but lingered, heavy and watchful, in the dark. The walls themselves seemed to breathe, their ancient surfaces exhaling dampness and age in a steady, unyielding pulse. A shallow draft curled through the corridor, twisting like a pale ribbon of smoke, threading through the heavy silence. Your nostrils flared at the mingled scents: damp stone, faint incense smoke, and the sharp tang of rust. The scent pricked at the back of your throat. It tasted like forgotten ages, memories etched deep in the castle's bones. Somewhere within that mixture lay the heavy promise of endurance, of things unseen but felt, a waiting that bore no kindness. Ahead, the corridor narrowed abruptly, the ceiling dipping low enough to brush the top of your head if you were careless. You slowed further, every motion measured against the fragile stillness. The rough stone wall scraped gently against your palm once more, the moisture clinging to it, cold and unwavering. You stepped forward into the gap, the feel of the narrowing passage pressing against your senses, like a low hum vibrating through the air itself. Your footfalls softened, intentionally, as you entered the throat of the passage, the stones slick with cold dew, each step finding less resistance, but more uncertainty. The tapping resumed, slow, deliberate, a sound as steady as a heartbeat, hidden beneath layers of frost. You listened, letting it draw you inward, deeper into the castle's dark embrace. The muted orange glow from somewhere distant flickered faintly against the stone, a sleepy pulse beneath the growing shadows. A thin veil of something moved near the far end of the corridor, an imperceptible shift in the mist, like a breath caught and held just beyond reach. You reached out instinctively, your fingers brushing against cold air, grasping nothing but the sensation of waiting. The tapestry you had felt earlier stirred faintly at its edges, the frayed threads moving as if stirred by a breeze no one else could perceive. You glanced up sharply, eyes straining to pierce the thickness of gloom. But the passage remained empty, save for the whispering mist curling tight against worn stones. The tapping echoed again, louder this time, mingling with a distant murmur, a low rhythmic chant, too subtle to decipher, but weighted with ancient insistence. You swallowed, the dry knot tightening as the cold bit deeper into your chest. The small wooden pole felt heavier in your hand, the roughness a stubborn comfort against the spread of growing unease. Your breath slowed instinctively, matching the cadence of the sound that rippled through the dark. You moved forward deliberately, footsteps steady. The walls seemed to close in around you as the passage bent sharply left. The air grew thick, the scent turning sweeter suddenly, like burning wax mingled with damp earth. The orange glow bloomed faintly here, spilling from a shallow alcove, crowned by an iron brazier, half swallowed by shadow. The embers inside glowed quietly, casting flickering, tentative light over the rough stone. You paused beside it, the warmth slipping gently across your cold fingers, even before you reached out. The brazier's heat was a fragile thing, steady yet fleeting, a small heart of fire beating stubbornly against the chill that followed your every step. The smoky scent wound around you, mingling with the sharp tang lingering in the air. You bowed slightly, feeling the weight of unsaid prayers in the stillness, the whispered offerings left unspoken. The corridor stretched farther, narrowing once more, the walls bearing the faintest trace of scratched symbols carved deep into the stone. You traced one slowly with your finger, a jagged line that seemed to pulse faintly beneath your touch, cold and alive in the shifting light. The rune carried a weight you could almost feel pressing against your palm, heavy with the silence of forgotten voices. You hesitated, hand trembling minutely as the distant tapping shifted rhythm again, slightly quicker, more urgent, but still deliberate. A slow pull drew your gaze downward to the cold floor, where faded marks traced a path deeper into the shadow. The stones there felt slick and worn, as if countless unspoken steps had traced this way before, each one sinking into memory like a soft imprint in dust. You took a breath, steadying the catch in your throat, your eyes flicking to the narrow stairway that spiraled downward, swallowed by the darkness beyond the flickering light. The urge to descend was a whisper in your blood, a call that tugged gently at your resolve. The air shifted again, a breath cold and sharp, carrying a whisper, not quite a word, but a promise sealed in silence. The mist swirled at your feet, cold fingers wrapping around your ankles with quiet insistence. You felt the weight of unseen eyes pressing from every shadow, and somewhere in that unseen watchfulness, the tapping ceased abruptly, leaving behind only a heavy, pregnant silence. Your heart hammered in response, slow and deliberate, echoing the absence like a distant drum. The castle seemed to hold its breath with you, poised on the brink of something just beyond knowing. You took one last look at the winding passage behind you, empty, mist-shrouded, waiting, and then stepped forward into the dark stairwell, the cold embracing you like an old, unyielding friend. The stones beneath your feet seemed to pulse faintly, as if alive with the memories of countless forgotten steps. And then, just as the stairway swallowed your form, a distant, low murmur slipped through the shadows, a sound so subtle you might have mistaken it for the castle itself breathing out a secret, the last breath of silence before the darkness. You hesitated at the edge of the stairwell, the quiet weight of the darkness pressing against your senses, thick and unyielding. The cool stone beneath your fingers felt damp, a slight slickness betraying the moisture that clung stubbornly to these ancient walls. Your breath curled softly in the chill air, a fragile wisp that seemed too loud in the stillness. The faint light from the candle far above slipped away behind the bend, leaving you submerged in shadows that thickened as you stepped downward. Each careful footfall was a slow negotiation with the intrusive silence. The cold seeped deeper now, crawling beneath the fabric that clung to your frame, clutching at your skin like the roots of some long-forgotten tree. The scent of earth and smoke lingered, mingling with the sharp tinge of rust on metal, and the faintest hint of something sweeter, perhaps incense, or the lingering trace of old prayers whispered by unseen lips. The air felt dense, folded tight, as if to hold a secret too ancient to speak. You moved deliberately, hands lightly brushing the stone walls, following the rough grain that ran like veins beneath your touch. The steps curved beneath your weight, spiraling into a narrowing shaft where the fog swirled low, shifting with slow, deliberate motion like a pale tide reluctant to recede. The rhythmic tapping sound returned, steady and deliberate, a heartbeat echoing faintly from the depths below. It was neither threatening nor comforting, but a constant presence that seemed to guide your descent, weaving through the silence like a thread of cold light. The dim glint of something metallic caught your eye, a rusted latch perhaps, or the edge of a long-forgotten door. You reached out slowly, fingertip grazing the cold surface, tracing the outline with a hesitant reverence. The metal was rough and pitted, worn by time and neglect, yet stubbornly resilient, against the creeping decay. The scent here grew sharper, the metallic tang knitting tight with the musk of earth, and something darker, buried beneath layers of age and shadow. Your steps softened as you passed beyond the stairwell, entering a chamber half swallowed by gloom. The stone floor was slick with moisture, tiny pools catching the trembling light from a faint glow somewhere close by. Your eyes adjusted slowly to the dimness, revealing the faint outline of ancient carvings. Etched into the walls, cryptic shapes that pulsed faintly with an eerie resonance beneath your touch. The air was heavier here, thicker and more resistant, as if the very atmosphere held its breath in watchful silence. That steady tapping grew louder, blending with a quiet murmur, a hum threading delicately through the stone. You moved toward the soft light, feet tracing a hesitant path through the damp cold, each step measured to avoid stirring dust or echo. The glow came from a cluster of candles arranged low on a stone pedestal, their flames flickering weakly but steadfast, casting long, wavering shadows that danced across the carved surfaces. Your hand brushed against the cold pedestal, fingers lingering on the rough, uneven stone. The carvings beneath were worn smooth in places, as if touched by countless unseen hands, their meaning swallowed by time, but still whispering from the depths. The candle's smoky scent mingled with the deep, rich odor of aged wood and extinguished fires, a scent that evoked memories just out of reach. Around you, the space seemed to pulse faintly, the cold air stirring without wind, the light trembling as if alive with its own heartbeat. The tapping rhythm shifted suddenly, quicker now, more urgent, sending a shiver crawling along your spine. Your gaze sharpened, searching the shadows for the source, but found only the slow rise and fall of mist, a faint veil that clung like a shroud over the chamber's cold stone. There was a sound then, barely more than a breath, a rustle, soft and deliberate, brushing near your shoulder. You turned slowly, heart steady but alert, drinking in the silence that answered. The shadow near the alcove wavered, a softness that melted away before your eyes could settle, leaving behind only the faint residue of a presence gone too fast to grasp. Your breath caught briefly in your throat as cold seeped deeper, threading through the seams of your worn coat and burrowing into the bone. You tightened your grip on the wooden pole, the rough resin smell grounding you like an anchor. The steady tapping persisted, a cautious drumbeat against the walls, calling you forward, drawing you deeper into the castle's hold. Ahead, narrow stone steps led down from the chamber, curling into deeper darkness. You paused at the threshold, the cold air pulsing like a living thing, whispering promises unspoken and warnings half hidden beneath the stillness. The scent of smoke and earth thickened here, intertwined now with a faint metallic sharpness that lingered just beyond awareness. Your fingers brushed a fresh line of scratches on the wall, delicate, deliberate, and a chill ripple stirred through you, as if the marks carried the weight of names unuttered. Stepping downward, the light from the candles dwindled until it was swallowed completely. Your footsteps fell silent against the cold stone, the cloak of darkness folding around you like a living shadow. The tapping slowed, retreating into the depths as you ventured farther still, the silence that replaced it heavier somehow, thick with expectancy and the promise of unseen things waiting just beyond the edge of perception. You halted as a sudden shift in the air brushed past your face, a cold breath that was not wind, but something else, slow and deliberate, inhaling with the castle itself. There in the knot of shadows at the stairwell's base, a faint glow blossomed, ashen and pale as moonlight, hovering unmoving, suspended in the black. Your pulse tightened, slow and sure, as you reached out instinctively, palm outstretched toward the dim light, and then, without warning, the glow shattered, fractured into shards that scattered into the darkness like whispers lost to the night, leaving you alone, standing at the threshold of silence, with only the echo of the vanished light ringing in your ears. You stood at the bottom of the stairwell, the faded warmth of the candlelit chamber lingering behind you like a half-remembered dream. The shadows around you breathed slow and heavy, folding the cold stone walls into layers of silence that settled deep into your bones. Each breath you drew gathered the stale chill of ancient air, swirling it gently in the hollow of your chest, mingling with the faint scent of earth and distant smoke that hung stubbornly in reach. Your fingers brushed against the rough stone beside you, tracing cracks carved by time and neglect, grounding you in the solidity beneath the creeping void. The stairwell wound downward, each step slick with subtle moisture, the cold dripping slowly into the spaces between your toes. Your feet pressed carefully against the worn surfaces, feeling the uneven edges biting just enough to remind you of every measured moment. The rhythmic tapping faintly echoed below, the slow, deliberate beat that pulled you deeper, a whispered summons weaving through the dark. The air grew thick with waiting, as if the stone itself held its breath, watching, patient, but never idle. Your skin prickled where the damp clung closest, a cool wetness pressing softly against your thin coat, weaving shadows of cold deep into your frame. The faint glow of something unseen flickered ahead, a hush of light, shifting quietly in the dense gathering gloom. You stepped forward almost reluctantly, every motion careful, heavy with the knowledge that each choice could unlock more than just darkness. Passing through a narrowing corridor, the scent of burnt resin wove itself through the air, threaded now with a sharper metallic tang, like the distant promise of blades long laid to rest, or blood sealed beneath stone. Your fingers gripped the wooden pole tighter, the rough grain a stubborn, grounding friend, as you swallowed the tight knot, coiling gentle but unyielding in your throat. The stone walls held faint carvings here, deep-edged grooves that pulsed faintly under your touch. Whispers of names and spells lost to time, stitched in silence. A soft scuff echoed somewhere farther ahead. You froze. A slow moment stretched taut between heartbeats. The tapping had stopped again, leaving a hush that was heavier for its absence. The cold simmered thicker in the air, pressing down like invisible hands that whispered threats not spoken, but profoundly understood. Your hand brushed the wall, tracing a jagged scratch, fresh with the memory of deliberate claws. A silent pulse of warning that sent a shiver spiking unbidden along your spine. Compelled, you moved forward into a widening chamber where the air tingled cold but carried a different scent. Something faintly sweet but edged with decay, like wilted flowers trapped beneath frozen glass. In the corner, a cluster of candles fought steadily against the shifting shadows, their flickering flames casting quivering light across the uneven surfaces. You approached slowly, mindful of every breath, and caught the smoky essence of melting wax, tangled with the sharp, almost sharp, bite of old iron. The walls around you bore more carvings, symbols you couldn't quite name, etched deep with care, long since forgotten. You traced them with a trembling fingertip, feeling the cold pulse beneath the stone, a shut and still, watching unseen through the ages. The tapping resumed then, softer, almost hesitant, weaving through the murmur of darkness like a slow heartbeat returning. It drew you to the far side of the chamber, where a narrow passage stretched forward, swallowed in gloom and shadow. You paused there, the cold air curling around your ankles like fingers of mist, whispering secrets pressed tight against your skin. The light ahead flickered indecisive, shifting between promise and retreat as the walls seemed to lean in tighter, closing around the narrowing path. A sudden flicker at the edge of your sight, a shimmer, a breath of movement, pulled your gaze to the darkness just beyond the candlelight's reach. You turned slowly, every sense pricked wide. The space breathed with quiet weight, thick with absence and whispered echoes. Your pulse steadied, slow and deliberate. The silence. You stepped forward, each footfall a measured negotiation with the stone cold beneath your soles. The passage bent sharply and descended again, spiraling you deeper into the unseen belly of the castle. The damp tightened its hold, threading cold veins through your clothes and skin, carrying a faint musky scent that hinted at rotting leaves and forgotten things buried beneath time's endless snow. The wooden pole in your hand pressed steady and familiar, a fragile tether to the fading light of reason amid encroaching shadow. At last, you reached a hollow where the tapping ceased again, swallowed by a silence so deep It seemed to pulse with its own breath. A faint luminescence hovered there, pale and ashen, like the ghost of moonlight left to linger in a pool of darkness. You reached out, palm steady, despite the cold crawling up your arm, toward the dim glow that hung suspended, fragile and trembling. Before your fingers met the light, it shattered without sound, scattering like broken glass into the unseen void, dissolving the fragile warmth. The chill rushed in swiftly, folding around you, sharp, absolute, and final. Your breath caught, heavy in the quiet that followed, hovering on the edge of something eternal. And then, from that stilled darkness, a new sound began. A slow, low whisper weaving through the stones, soft and certain, pressing close. You could no longer tell if it was the castle itself or the voice of something waiting patiently beyond the reach of light. You stepped further into the dark spiral, the rough stone curling beneath your cautious tread, each careful step sinking into the chill that clung like shadow's breath. The cold thickened, seeping slowly through the threadbare fabric pressed tight against your skin, a creeping frost that whispered its slow claim against your warmth. Your fingers grazed the wall again, tracing its uneven texture, a web of cracks and ancient scars folded deeply into the stone, as though the castle itself carried wounds pressed silent beneath the weight of time. The rhythmic tapping resumed, steady and slow, weaving itself through the silence like a heartbeat muffled beneath layers of thick moss and damp earth. Ahead, the thin flicker of light pulsed faintly, a hesitant pulse, fragile as a last ember whispered down to ash. It cast long shadows that stretched and wavered, dancing softly in the narrow chamber where time seemed to pause, held captive in thick blankets of cold and quiet. The scent here was a tangled weave of must and smoldering resin, underscored by the sharp bite of iron, rusty and sharp, curling in the stale air like the lingering edge of a warning half forgotten. You drew a slow breath, feeling the cold thread through your chest, settling like ice tangled in muscle and bone. The thin corridor opened suddenly into a wider space, where faded tapestries hung limply against the walls, their rich colors dulled and muted to the softest grays and deep burgundies. The stories they once told, now broken whispers caught in frayed edges. Your hand brushed over one, fingers tracing a lingering weave of thread so fine it felt like the memory of a breath. The fabric clung faintly to your skin, its faint scent of old dyes and dust folding around you like a shroud. The tapping shifted in rhythm, growing slightly quicker but no less deliberate. It pulsed deeper in the chamber now, echoing softly from the floor beneath your feet, as if the stone itself was trying to speak in a language lost to time. You knelt slowly, palms pressed to the cold, uneven surface worn smooth by centuries of footsteps never seen. The pulse vibrated faintly beneath your touch, a subtle thrum woven into the heart of the stone, half felt by the nerves in your fingers, half whispered to your lungs with each measured breath. A distant shiver slipped through the air, a rumble caught in the depths of the castle's bones, a fractured whisper folding gently around the edges of the chamber, stirring the thick mist that swirled low like restless smoke. The candlelight flickered uncertainly, casting fragile shapes that leapt and faltered, shadows that stretched long fingers into the dark corners where no light dared linger. You pulled your coat tighter around you, its rough fabric rasping quietly against your skin, a reminder of the fragile barrier between warmth and the cold that seeped unhindered. The soft murmur of voices reached your ears then, faint and threadbare, more a pulse beneath the stone than spoken words. You stood slowly, alert but unmoving, breath shallow and steady as you searched the dimness, sight tracing the edges of shadowed corners. Nothing stirred, save the subtle sway of mist curling near the high arches, the faint dance of salt and smoke carried on the cool air like forgotten prayers burned long ago. Your gaze fell to a narrow staircase curling tightly to one side, its steps worn thin and slick, disappearing into a darkness that felt alive with secrets and slow breathings. The air shifted as you approached, carrying the low, steady rhythm of the tapping through a thick curtain of silence that wrapped around you like a whispering fog. You reached out softly, fingertips tracing a fresh line scratched deep into the stone beside the stairwell, a mark jagged and deliberate, its sharp edges unexpected against the ancient roughness. The scent shifted again, the sweet tang of melting wax accompanying the sharper trace of something like iron and earth disturbed. Your breath caught, slow and deep, mingling with the cold air that filled your lungs with each hesitant step downward. The wooden pole felt heavier in your hand, its familiar roughness grounding you as the shadows leaned in closer, folding you into the castle's silent hold. Each footfall echoed softly, swallowed quickly by the dense stillness as you descended, the staircase spiraling you deeper into unknown weight. The pulse of tapping slowed once more, retreating like a fading heartbeat, leaving behind a vacuum of silence that felt thick and waiting. The smell of smoke grew stronger here, mingled with damp stone and ancient earth, wrapping tightly around you with the unmistakable presence of old secrets held close to the quiet. At the base of the staircase, a chamber stretched wider, its walls carved with symbols, lines and shapes that danced faintly in the flickering light of a single candle placed atop a rough stone plinth. The flame wavered softly, casting delicate shadows across the worn carvings, their ancient language silent but thrumming beneath your fingertips. You knelt again, tracing the delicate curves with trembling touch. The cold stone, alive beneath your skin, as though responding to the faint pulse of your breath. Suddenly, the flame flickered violently, throwing the chamber into dancing light and deep shadow. A slender shape moved just beyond the candlelight's edge, a shimmer barely caught at the corner of your vision. Your heart slowed its beating, while tightening, a cold grip clutching at your ribs. The air thickened, carrying a whisper that was no longer distant, but close and certain. The wooden pole steady in your grasp, the familiar scent of resin stark against the creeping dread. The tapping ceased altogether, replaced by a slow, breathless stillness that hung like a held note in the air, vibrating with silent promise. The shadows deepened, pulling tight around you as the faint glow collapsed inward, folding the world into an endless black. And in that perfect, frozen moment, a cold hand brushed your wrist, a touch so fleeting you might have imagined it, yet unmistakably there, a presence waiting just beyond the edge of the ever-thickening dark. You paused at the edge of the widening chamber, the cold pressing in like a weight, settling firmly against your skin. The flickering candlelight cast trembling shadows that stretched and softened the carved walls, their ancient symbols whispering stories half forgotten, pulsing faintly beneath your fingertips. The scent of melted wax mingled with the sharpness of iron and the damp earth, weaving through the air in restless curls that tickled the back of your throat. Your breath, shallow and even, floated in small clouds that dissolved quickly in the heavy stillness. The wooden pole felt familiar and steady against your palm, a small anchor as the steady, persistent tapping began once more. It sounded slow, deliberate, a faint heartbeat pressed beneath the thick silence. Each tap felt weighted with meaning, coaxing you deeper into the shadows beyond the candle's trembling glow. Your footsteps whispered against the cold stone floor as you moved cautiously forward, every step a careful negotiation with the chill settling deep within your bones. Ahead, the passage narrowed again, the ceiling dipping low to blot out the weak flicker of light behind you. The cold air folded tightly around your body, whispering its slow, stubborn claim. Your fingers traced the rough stone walls, feeling the uneven scars and the delicate web of cracks that had formed over uncounted years. The bitter scent of resin faded subtly here, replaced by the faintest edge of decay, a scent like wilting petals trapped beneath an icy glass. You swallowed against the sudden tightness in your throat, steadying your breath and your nerves. The tapping shifted in rhythm, quickening just enough to unsettle the measured cadence, but never losing its deliberate grace. It drew you near a narrow, arched doorway, its heavy frame swallowed by mist that lingered like a veiled breath between you and whatever lay beyond. A metallic tang prickled your nose, sharp and cold, drifting strong from the shadowed void. The faint glow of unseen fires pulsed weakly beyond the threshold, teasing you with a hesitant warmth. Your palm lingered on the doorframe's rough stone as you stepped through, entering a small chamber, chilled to the bone. The walls were close, enclosing you in an intimate silence that seemed to hum softly with held breath. A lone brazier burned quietly, its embers faintly glowing orange and fading to ash with every slow exhale. The smoky scent wrapped softly around you, a quiet reminder of fires long spent, conversations never spoken. You sank slowly to the floor by the brazier, the cold stone pressing insistently through your worn clothing. The heat curled faintly across your skin, a fragile barrier against the relentless chill. Your eyes scanned the room's gloom, settling on faded symbols etched deep into the walls, worn by time and hand alike, their meaning elusive but charged with an ancient power. The steady tapping was distant here, more a murmur beneath the stone, weaving itself into your slowing heartbeat. The shadows layered thick and soft, touched by flickers of fading flame. The silence grew dense, wrapping tight, like a blanket too heavy to shrug off. Somewhere far above, the faint tolling of a bell wafted through the stone corridors, slow, mournful, and fading before it could fully reach you. That sound lingered, a fragile thread tying you to the outside world, reminding you of the fragile lives nestled beneath the castle's indifferent gaze. Your muscles shifted as you settled deeper into the cold floor, a slow sigh escaping your lips. The weight in your chest eased just enough to let your mind drift, but not enough to soothe the ever-watchful tension, rising like a slow tide. The bare stone felt uneven beneath your palms, gritty with dust and the residue of forgotten footsteps, each grain a tiny echo of those who had come before you. Your hand twitched lightly, trace pulse faintly, a heartbeat tangled with your own. The tapping grew louder again, drawing closer in slow waves of sound, coaxing you upward. You rose deliberately, body slow and heavy with cold, steadying your breath as the air shifted once more. The flame near the brazier dimmed, flickering under a breath not your own, casting dancing shadows that reached toward the vaulted ceiling. You stepped toward the dark stairwell beyond the chamber's far wall, its stones worn thin and slick with unseen moisture, spiraling down into a deeper, colder silence. Each step took careful weight, the stone cool and unyielding beneath your feet. The mist tangled at your ankles once more, curling tight and clammy, as if reluctant to let you leave the warmth of the chamber. The tapping thrummed beneath you now, steady and insistent, weaving through the cold air like a slow breath held underwater. The walls closed tighter as you descended, pressing in with the weight of centuries folded into their rough edges. The air grew heavier still, thick with the scent of earth, iron, and a faint, almost imperceptible sweetness that clung to the cold like a secret. Your fingers brushed a fresh scratch deep in the stone beside you, the sharp edges biting cold through your gloves. A silent message carved in deliberate haste. The wooden pole gripped firmly, your anchor, as the flight of stairs curled deeper into the castle's heart, a place folded in shadow and quiet menace. At last you came to a hollow beneath the stairs, a small chamber faintly lit by a solitary candle perched on a crumbling ledge. Its light wavered, casting trembling fingers across the etched symbols that crawled up the walls. Your breath came slow, the quiet thrum of the tapping reduced now to faint echoes lost beneath the stone's weight. The cold seeped deeper, threading through your clothes, clutching your skin like the slow embrace of the castle itself. Your outstretched hand reached for the candle's flame, the warmth a fragile promise against the relentless dark. But before your fingers could close around it, a sudden shadow flickered beyond the light's edge, a shape barely glimpsed, dissolving as silently as a whispered breath. The silence slammed down once more, pressing heavy and absolute. Then, from the depths of that darkened place, a new sound emerged, low and deliberate, as slow and constant as the tapping had been, but this time threaded with a breathless urgency. Your pulse tightened, heartbeat slowing in measured response. In the dark beyond the candle's fragile glow, something waited, and it had finally made itself known. The darkness held its breath as you stood still, the shards of scattered light fading into an abyss of softened shadows. The cold that had clung so fiercely to your skin now felt gentler, less like an unwelcome guest, and more like an old friend, easing you toward an unspoken understanding. In this quiet chamber, beneath the ancient stones, the weight pressing upon your chest began to loosen, releasing the last brittle threads of the castle's restless grip. You lowered your hand from the empty space where the fragile glow had been, shattered and scattered, like memories slipping beyond your reach. Yet, in the aftermath of its vanishing, a new clarity settled over the air. The silent whispers, the tapping heartbeat that had guided you this far, now softened into a steady quietude that cradled the room like a warm breath after a long winter night. Slowly, your eyes adjusted to the dimness that lingered, revealing the faint outlines. With care and time's patient hand, those symbols pulsing faintly beneath your fingertips earlier no longer bore the weight of warnings, but seemed to pulse with a quiet acceptance, as if the castle itself had acknowledged your arrival and in turn was ready to grant its peace. The air, once thick with the sharp tang of rust and forgotten iron, had shifted to something softer, a subtle earthiness that spoke of endings and new beginnings hidden deep beneath the surface. You settled your frame against the rough stone wall, the cold now hardly biting but soothing, a balm for weary bones. The wooden pole, your companion through the shadows, rested quietly at your side, its familiar roughness grounding you in this moment of calm transition. Your breath slowed, deep and steady, each exhale a gentle release of tension, coiling inside, like a fading seemed to rise from the very stones beneath you. A soft exhalation of old secrets, finally given rest. The tapestry you touched once before fluttered faintly in the whispering draft, undulating like a benediction to the past that lingered in this place. The frayed threads, once vibrant with tales now lost to time, seemed to fold gently into themselves, as if wrapping the history safely away from the chill. Outside, the hedge of fog that had so long clung to the village's breath was thinning, a pale sunrise pushing tentative fingers through the veil. For the first time since your arrival, a fragile light began to seep into the castle's heart, painting the ancient stones with soft hues of dawn, gentle blues melting into warm amber, like the slow promise of renewal. You pushed yourself up from the stone, every movement slower now, heavier with finality, yet lighter in spirit. The passage that had once swallowed you in shadow now seemed less forbidding, the way forward marked only by the echo of your steps. Soft, sure, and at peace, you felt the lingering presence of the unseen watchers, but their weight was no longer oppressive. Instead, it was a quiet acknowledgement, a respectful nod to the journey taken and the truth faced. With a final glance back at the chamber, the flame's absence was no longer a void, but a settled silence, an invitation for what had been long unsettled to finally rest. The carved symbols glimmered faintly in the burgeoning light, not as a warning, but as a testament to endurance, memory, and the passage of time that enveloped all things, living or otherwise. Stepping back into the narrowing corridor, the cool stone walls embraced you with a newfound warmth, a paradox held in the depths of the castle's ancient bones. The mist curled gently around your ankles, but its pull was softened, like a lover's farewell rather than a captive's grasp. Your footsteps traced familiar paths, now worn smooth by history and your own passage, weaving a final thread into the tapestry of this place. As you emerged from the spiral staircase at last, the air was crisp and clear. The scents of damp earth and smoldering wood mingled softly, carried on the gentle stir of morning wind that brushed against your skin like a sigh. The village beyond the gates stirred, faint murmurs of life awakening beneath the retreating fog's ghostly shroud, a world waiting patiently for light to reach even its darkest corners. You paused at the threshold, your gaze stretching outward to the horizon, where the pale sun began its slow ascent. The weight of silence, once a shroud, suffocating and relentless, had lifted, leaving behind a hush filled not with dread, but with a tender, fragile hope, the kind born only when shadows recede and promise lingers in the air. A quiet smile touched your lips, barely perceptible, but enough to break the long-held restraint. This castle, with all its secrets and sorrow, had surrendered its grasp. The restless spirits, bound by memories and silence, were at last free to dissolve into the dawn. And you, survivor and witness, carried with you the whispered stories, the pulse of stone and shadow that would now rest gently away. The cold no longer clung, replaced instead by the gentle warmth of the waking world. Your breath fell easy, calm as soft snow settling on quiet earth. The mist retreated fully, revealing the worn cobblestones bathed in early light, the same stones that had borne countless feet before yours and would bear many more after. You turned slowly away from the castle's stoic silhouette, the heavy gates closing softly behind you like the closing of a chapter long whispered, but now finally told. As you stepped into the morning, the chill lifted fully, replaced by the tender embrace of daybreak. The silence that had once frightened now comforted, a lullaby sung by walls that had witnessed time itself. And as you walked through the awakening village, the world around you softened like a sigh. The journey into darkness had given way to the gentle unfolding of morning, a calm that settled over your bones and mind like a warm blanket. Here, in this fragile peace, the story found its end, not in screams or shadows, but in quiet release. The echoes faded into memory, and all that remained was the steady, sleepy beat of life going on. A tender close, a whispered goodnight. Now, rest.